Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound, Avalanche of Change. That will be the title of our episode for December 16th, 2024. Vic and Neil with you. How's your weekend, Mr. Smith?
Everything's good other than this stupid sinus infection, which keeps coming back. But I guess that's what the winter is made for.
Well, you're a former hockey player, and you all know that we play through pain. So before we welcome in our guest, Colorado Avalanche General Manager Chris MacFarland, 3 things that you need to pay attention to. The New York Rangers have now lost 10 out of 13, a lost weekend for them. 5-1 defeat, listless against Los Angeles at home on Saturday, and then 3-2 in St. Louis on Sunday evening. In that game, Artemi Panarin was out with an upper body injury. Keandre Miller already out for this entire 3-game road trip that the Rangers are on. Kaapo Kakko was scratched. Chris Kreider dropped to the 4th line. The team was listless again for 50 minutes last night, had a little bit of a pulse in the final 10, but still pulled up short. Has Peter Laviolette run out of cards to play here?
That's if he's playing the cards. I don't know who's playing the cards. Who's the dealer? Is it Drury or is it Peter Laviolette? Is Drury and him getting together and saying, well, let's shake them up. Let's put Kreider on the 4th line. I don't know what you're going to get out of putting Chris Kreider on the 4th line and scaring people or something. And I don't know what you're getting out of scratching Kaapo Kakko, other than if you think he's just not playing very well, but then you should scratch the whole team. I don't, from afar, I don't understand it. But is Peter Laviolette on the ledge looking down and Chris Drury right behind him with a knife to make him walk the plank? I would think so.
Maybe with Kakko holding him out for a trade?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That would have got out.
Number 2, the Carolina Hurricanes are reportedly in the market for a goaltender after missing out on MacKenzie Blackwood. Pyotr Kochetkov is now the clear number 1. Freddie Anderson is out long-term. Spencer Martin has been sent down to the AHL because of his shortcomings in performance. So in goal last night against Columbus, Dustin Tokarski. This is the same Tokarski that played in the 2014 Eastern Final for Montreal when Carey Price went down against the New York Rangers. So if you start to look around at potential goaltenders heading to Carolina, does John Gibson from Anaheim look like he would be a proper fit there? He's got 2 more years left on his deal after this one at $6.4 million. Going to probably need to have Anaheim eat some of that money due to the cap crunch that the Hurricanes are in.
I think the question, Vic, is what would Pat Verbeek want to extract out of Carolina? And can Carolina satisfy him to the point where their team gets better with the addition of Gibson? It's one thing to say, let's add Gibson, let's go get Gibson. But then what have you got to give to Pat Verbeek and the Ducks to get Gibson? And if sometimes what you're giving up is going to be more damaging to the team than what you're bringing in. So, it's Gibson would be a good guy for Carolina for sure if they can get Pat Verbeek what he would want. And remember, if it's draft picks, Carolina picks pretty high in the draft.
Yes, they do. And, of course, there are other names that are floating out there, but with Anaheim with only 26 points and 8th in the wild card, they're falling out of contention fast. So it would be probable that they would be looking to make some sort of moves to try to continue to bolster their future. Number 3, Monday, the Stanley Cup final rematch between Florida and Edmonton. The Oilers currently on a 5-game winning streak, and Panthers offense has kind of gone dark the last couple of games. They opened up a 5-game road trip with a shootout win in Seattle, but then have been shut out in consecutive games in Vancouver and Calgary. And perhaps just maybe looking ahead.
I would think so. I mean, remember that the last time these two teams played in Edmonton, Alberta, Edmonton won, which forced everything to go back again to Florida for Game 7, which is where Florida was able to win the Stanley Cup. And so we'll see. I mean, it's there's still a lot of question marks about the Edmonton makeup of their roster. And I don't think there's as many questions about the Florida Panthers as there is about the Edmonton Oilers and their probability of repeating what they did last year. I think you could bet more on Florida repeating what they did than you could on Edmonton repeating what they did because of the holes in the lineup.
Yes, that's true. But among the issues that Edmonton may or may not have, I don't think motivation in this game is going to be one of them.
No, it won't. It'll all depend. Again, Stuart Skinner, how's he going to play? And it'll be a good game. I mean, no matter who wins, all it's going to tell you is that it was a real good game.
And those teams will meet down in Florida later in the season in February.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome the general manager of the Colorado Avalanche, Chris MacFarland. Chris, of course, took over for the famous Joe Sakic, who took over for the famous Pierre Lacroix. And that franchise has always been in good hands. And Chris, thanks for being on NHL Wraparound.
No worries, guys. Thanks for having me.
I'll just start right off with the one of the biggest stories of the year. And one of the things that I don't think in my career, which goes back 50 years, I don't think I've ever seen it before. You start the season with Georgiev and Annunen as a tandem, and you're giving Georgiev another shot. I mean, you made a big trade to get him from the Rangers, and then it just didn't work. And I guess my question would be to you is, when did it become obvious enough that it wasn't going to work, that you made not only one, but two moves to shore up your goaltending?
Yeah, it was certainly wasn't the plan by any stretch. I think, Alex has won a lot of games here over the last few years, and last year he had a really rough game 1 against Winnipeg, and then he bounced back. It was quite impressive, actually, because we're on the road in Winnipeg, and he's going up against, arguably one of the best in the business, and Connor Hellebuck, and a really strong Winnipeg Jets team. And, Georgiev went toe to toe with him. And then same with Ottinger in round 2 against a really solid Dallas team, obviously. So he was quite good for us, last year in the postseason. So, and you guys know, it's hard, to get, goalies. It's hard to trade for them. When you have one, you're not moving one. Why would you move your starting guys? So we felt good at going into the off season that Georgiev and Annunen, who's a young kid, a quiet, studious, hardworking kid, could give us hopefully league average type goaltending, and because they had in the past. So. But we were shaken early. We got off to a rough start, and it's not a secret that they were struggling. They'd be the first to tell you that. And Eustis had a strong road trip about the second or third weekend. So it's you can survive, as you guys know, when goalies are going to have off nights or an off stretch here and there, but when they're sort of both trying to find it and battle their way through. Maybe confidence is shaken, or whatever. We were missing guys. It was certainly wasn't. We weren't playing great times in front of them. So certainly wasn't goalie only. We were finding our way too, and missing some vital cogs in our lineup. Not excuses, just reality. And it just, as it wore off into October and November, we just thought we have to try to find a way to see if there's a chance to upgrade. So you activate your goalie department and your scouts and your cap outlook on what's going on this year and next year. And we were able to make the Scott Wedgwood trade, and just felt the veteran guy, a good veteran guy with some juice would be important. We didn't take that lightly because Annanen's a kid and still trying to, establish himself as an NHL guy. But we felt that Wedgwood's, veteran presence would also be a help for Georgiev. We didn't do that trade thinking, we're going to trade Georgiev in 10 days or 2 weeks. It just happened that was an available trade for what Trotzy was looking to do with Nashville and for us. So, and then obviously a few weeks later, the Blackwood thing was able to come to fruition. But, if Mike Greer and the Sharks aren't willing to, discuss Blackwood sincerely, then there is no deal, as you guys know. So it wasn't by design. We're going to look to trade both. I can tell you that.
Well, as I said, I think that's the first time that I can ever remember the team started with two goaltenders and ended up with two others. And I've always liked Wedgwood myself, and certainly Blackwood went in and did a number this year on New Jersey which was his old team. And so I got to see him a little bit. I just want to ask you one more thing about something that's happened with the Avalanche that I had back in the late 90s. I had a situation with the Rangers where Kevin Stevens got into some trouble in St. Louis. I don't know if you remember that, but he got into some trouble, off ice trouble, and we ended up having to look after the situation as best we could. And it's something that I had never encountered in my life. And it was sad because, you know Kevin and you feel really bad for him and his family. And, let's face it, we all make mistakes, but you got Val Nichushkin and who's a great player. I mean, really a good player. He ends up having his own difficulties during 23 playoffs. And then during the 24 playoffs, again, you just suddenly lose him. And now he's back. And I guess what most people would ask is, how do you handle that as the manager? Like it's tough when you've got a situation where you're hoping the guy is getting rid of the demons that he's got to want to go down the wrong path that he went down. And he's such a valuable player to you. I mean, him and Rantanen and MacKinnon and Makar. I mean, that's what everybody talks about, right? When they talk about the Avalanche. I just wanted to ask from your standpoint with players that find themselves in these difficult personal situations.
Well, I there's no playbook for it, right, Neil? Like it's the first and foremost is the concern for the person, right? There's hockey and then there's life. And obviously we all know people and family members, friends, whatever acquaintances that struggle in this area. And I think the first thing you want to do is make sure that they get the help that they need so that they can, function as a father, a husband, a son or whatever. And obviously that's the first and primary goal from, our organization, the Val. I'd be lying if I said, the second and third time, especially the third time, that there's, especially in the playoffs, right? He was the leading goal scorer in the first round against Winnipeg. And, and he's a phenomenal hockey player. Our record with and without Val is staggering. He touches every aspect of what we're trying to do: 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill. He's a horse defensively. Like he's a really underrated player, even though, everyone knows he's a good player. But in my mind, he's a special top line, top six type winger. But, I think Val has done a really good job. this go around, with his treatment plan, and hopefully that continues. I think, as the general manager, your mind goes through all these different places, right? You got not once, not twice, 3 times the impact on the team, the cap, all those stuff goes through your head. But at the end of the day, I think the first thing first is for Val, because he's a good man. Like he's obviously had some struggles, but he's a good person, and you pull for him, and once he's committed in the off season, and now you hope that this time he's got it right, for him as a person first. And I think the good thing about our group is, yes, there's initial disappointment. Yes, it's happened a few times now, and just, the opportunity to advance, and that stings the group, right? So you go through these stages of, oh boy, is the disappointment for the player, but then there's the disappointment for the group that have, blood, sweated, and tears for 82 games and 2 years in a row. So there's all these different types of dynamics, but that's in the past now. We, with Landy out and our injury situation, we couldn't get a guy like Val. They don't grow on trees. So, when November 15th rolled around with, and I give our group credit with Bedsy and Joe and our leadership group, it's where Val's one of us, and we've got to make the environment as good as possible. Obviously, he has to do the work and continue to do the work, but once he was back, it was hockey and a family again. So, we'll hope and try and support Val, but hopefully he's in a much better place, and we'll go from there.
Do you think that getting back to the blood, sweat, and tears and that, which you're absolutely right, is there a trust that he's got to earn back with his teammates and his coach? I mean, the guys in the locker room, not the guys upstairs, but the guys in the locker room that are depending on each other every night.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think no one blames. It's not like, oh, he's got an addiction, or he went through a tough time or whatever. I think everyone is empathetic for that, and I think the group just wants what's best for Val, and what's best for Val is to be able to be functioning in his life, and an offshoot of that is he's a dynamic hockey player. So I think they go hand in hand, and if that the only thing that's going to do that, I think, is time, right? He's got to put some runway behind him, and hopefully he does that. And first and foremost, again, for himself, he's like I said, he's a dad and a husband, and what he's gone through is obviously not easy. And he didn't want to let anybody down or do any of that. It's just everyone says, oh, the playoffs 2 years in a row. Like, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, if it was the playoffs or 2 weeks before the playoffs or November, like, it's just an unfortunate situation, and there'd never be a good time for it, because his impact on our group is massive. But hopefully he knows that he has my support, Joe's support, and Betsy's support, and I know our players want what's best for Val, and obviously it's up to him. So we'll try and create the best area for him to have success, and but I think we need him. He's a great hockey player, and you wish the best for him, and I think he'll be good this time.
One player that you certainly never have an issue with, Nathan MacKinnon, 140 points last season, first to 50 this time around. And Neil had said in several discussions that we have had over time, this guy would rather die than lose. And it's got to be such a motivating factor for your entire team when you see a guy like this every single night go out with this much fire, and that he wants to improve every single shift that he's there.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. We're very fortunate to have a franchise center like Nathan. He touches everything we do on and off the ice. He's as driven a guy, a player as certainly I've ever been around. I think Joe would echo that. He's just super, super dialed in terms of maximizing his ability, maximizing his body. We've all heard the stories. He's diligent, and he's tenacious and very, very ultra competitive. He's really grown, as a leader, and with Landy out, and it's tough to find those number one centers, and then there's the number one centers that are superstars and franchise guys as well, and that's even a more select group. So, I think our fans, the hockey fans in general, but our fans in Colorado are very fortunate to be watching greatness, whenever 29 steps on the ice. And I know it's not lost on me to have a unicorn type player like that in that hole that grabs as much ice as he does and touches so many things that we do on and off the ice. We're very lucky to have him.
You'd mentioned Gabriel Landeskog a couple of times, and he has not played since lifting the cup in Tampa in 2022. I know that he's been working hard. Any update on any possible timetable for him?
Vic, I wish there was. There's certainly no way, when we like you pointed out that night of, June 26, 2022, that we were thinking, man, it'd be 3 years and he hasn't played a game. There's no playbook for this injury and this scenario that he's dealing with. I think, for us, there's still some things that need to be gleaned. He's working hard. We're leaving no stone unturned in terms of, people that he's seen, talk to other, people that have had the procedure, and his is a little bit, unique. It's unfortunate, but I'm a Landy believer, and I wouldn't bet against this guy. It's just the timing and the when is still very much unknown.
I want to talk about another all-world player on your roster, and that is, of course, Cale Makar. Calgary-born, decided to pass on major Canadian junior and head to UMass. And it's just interesting now that starting next season, CHL players will now be available to play in U.S. colleges. And just from your perspective, has the U.S. college program offer something to prospects, which he was at that time, that maybe is a little bit more advanced than Canadian juniors?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had all the answers as to how this is going to play out and how it's going to affect guys already on your reserve list that you've drafted, how the rights in the CBA are going to be determined. But it's definitely going to be a changing landscape. That's for sure. We've got a bunch of kids in the USHL that have college commitments, and how that's, going to look with, how much influx is there going to be? Is it going to be made, overage guys? Is it going to be the 18 and 19 year olds that are now have these options open? Is there going to be the formation of super teams? And, I'm curious to see how that's all going to play out. But to touch on Cale committed to UMass at a younger age, and I think if I remember right, he committed before the current coaching staff went in there, and he could have changed. But the one thing about Cale, and obviously he's a superstar in his own right, is he's a really loyal kid. That type of stuff matters. His word matters, and he went to obviously UMass and grew exponentially as a player, and to watch his game develop from when we took him 4th overall that year. And if you guys remember, we lost the lottery that year to go from 1 to 4, and we were very, very, very fortunate. And Cale is a super, super human being and a dynamite player, and like obviously Neil lived it, from his career, having, Messier and Leach, there's just, those guys are unicorn players. And when you have a stalwart, franchise center and a stalwart, number one D, those are pieces that, you can go years and years and years and never have on your team. So that's not lost on us here. We're watching greatness on and off the ice every day. And that's special.
And it's just extraordinary that he only played 2 years at UMass, won the Hobey Baker, won the Calder, has won the Norris Conn Smythe Trophy in 2022. And this young man is a legend already. And he's still very young in his career.
Very young. Yeah, he's and that's the thing. Like, you talk to him about that stuff. I don't know where his mind goes in quiet times when he's in, on his back deck or, at home with his family. But I can tell you he doesn't give off that aura. He's a very down to earth, humble kid that loves hockey and is about the team. But the accolades you mentioned are pretty darn special. And I say that, for myself, Joe obviously would acknowledge it, or, our coaches, but our local fans here in Denver, this is a pretty special time, similar to what they went through when the organization first came here. But to have not one, but two, guys that their trajectory is special in the game. When you start talking about where it can go, it's pretty unique, Vic.
I wanted to finish up, Chris, asking you about your team as a whole and more of managerial stuff, but you've had a lot of injuries and some adversity. We talked about the goaltending. You're still dealing with injuries to Drouin and Miles Wood and Manson and Killington. And so you've got, you still got some of that going on. Is there areas that you want to tweak or change?
Yeah, I don't know. I think when, we're asking a lot of some young guys, right? Ivan has been a nice story for us, but it's sort of been baptism by fire. I think we've got a few things. We've got to manage our cap. Neil, from being in that organizational cycle, from building to now you're sort of, in that window with an expectation to be as competitive as possible and managing the draft picks and prospects and those cupboards as well. And does it make sense? So I think, for us, we haven't really seen our group. And that's just reality. That's life in the NHL. We've missed three to four NHL guys every night. Since camp. So Drouin makes such a big difference because he's a top six talent and he's played 4 games, and Big Josh Manson is the one sort of thumper that we have on the back end. So those two guys are big losses for us. So hopefully we'll get those guys back. But I think we're definitely would like to deepen our lineup out, whether it's a bottom 6 piece or in the middle of the ice potentially, and then seeing how it looks come the deadline. But I think with the goaltending changes and just getting some guys back, I would like to see what it looks like in January, hopefully, and then obviously leading into the deadline, those things change daily with this guy's now available, that guy, and we'll have more information on our LTI and how that potentially fits in. But to get involved in some things, you need that information, and then you need to have the picks or the prospects if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to add as well. So there's so much information still to be gleaned, but hopefully we can get some guys back and see what it looks like.
I got to stop and ask you one thing. What is the special sauce that's in Denver, or maybe it's Jared Bednar's got the recipe that nobody else has, that Drouin became a top 6 player with the Avalanche when he had opportunities first in Tampa, then in Montreal. He was, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm not, he was drafted right with Nate MacKinnon in the same draft, and that was Seth Jones, I believe, and those two guys were the top 3 picks. You've got 2 of them now, and you're seemingly getting what everybody saw in Drew Annan Jr. You're getting most of that out of him now when other teams couldn't.
Well, I wish it was first and foremost. Val Nichushkin was similar, right? We had brought him here years ago, and he popped. But I think first and foremost, it's the player, right? It's the player has to buy into what we're doing, and I think Jonathan Drouin, it's never been about his skill. He uses skill. Anybody can see that by watching him play, a game or two. But I give him credit. I think he came in here. This was going to be an important, last year was going to be an important year for him. I think obviously his connection with Nathan was part of the draw for him and obviously us. And yes, our coaches. I think Jared Bednar is. I'm biased, but I've been with Bedsy a long time, going back to our days in Springfield in the AHL. I think he's, one of the best to do it. And he's just got a great way about him. And I don't think he gets enough credit myself, for what he does and what he brings. But I think Jonathan came in and saw the opportunity, his relationship with Nathan and checking is not optional here. Our top guys have to do it. And I think, so for me, we can say it, we can do it, we can tell them what to do, we can watch video and blah, blah, blah. And you use that word culture. It means something different to everybody. But I think Jonathan saw the opportunity, embraced it. I think it was fun for him. And he had success last year, and we certainly miss him this year. But I think it's all those things and environment and Nathan, but I think I give credit to the player because he's got to get it done.
That's for sure. Last thing before I let you go, I got to ask about this. Ivan, what is his nickname in the locker room? Because
it's a hard one, right? Because there's no sort of natural, I'll have to get back to you on that. I think everybody just calls him Ivan, but it's a unique one, and it's a good story because he was a guy that we put on an AHL deal, last year, and Neil, this when you're moving out picks and you're not drafting, in the first round every year, you need to find these guys, and Logan O'Connor has been huge for us as a sort of a freebie, and Ivan is a guy on an AHL deal out of the Quebec League. Looks like he's got a chance, even if it's, as a bottom part of the lineup. He can skate. He's got good skills. So we need to do a good job in those areas. And he's certainly done that, and he's put himself on the map as an NHL player. That's for sure.
Well, NHL players in the locker room and the way that everybody gets their nickname. And I just wondered, was it 2 times or?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look into that. Usually you just attach a Y on the end, wedgie or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I'll have to report back. I just call him Ivan. So I don't, he usually
I could.
You can't be wrong there.
No, can't be wrong.
I'm sure they have a lot of, I'll bet I can guarantee it. The players are having fun with that, though. They always do.
Yep, they do.
Well, thanks for doing this, Chris. I mean, it's been really insightful. I'm really glad to get to know you a little bit here. We didn't know each other really very well, but we really appreciate that you would trust us to come on and do this podcast, NHL Wraparound, and it's been great. And hopefully we can have you back on at some point, maybe when we're asking you about how you won the Stanley Cup this year.
Well, as you know, Neil, that's an unbelievable feeling, and very fortunate with what happened in 2022 with our guys. So thanks for having me on. It's always good to talk some hockey. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Neil, Chris MacFarland, such an outstanding guest, much as almost all of our guests, but so insightful, so much insight, and really grateful for his time today.
And what a good person. I mean, you can tell he's a good person just by the way he answers questions, just by the thought he puts into his players and the way he talks about his players and his staff. And I didn't know Chris before today, but I'm very impressed with him.
As we move forward, a reminder that short shifts will be on Wednesday and Friday of this week, and that we will be starting a new franchise on January 6th, New York centric, covering the Rangers, Islanders, and Devils. And that will, again, start on January 6th and continue to the end of the regular season. So, Neil, here come the Ottawa Senators, now second in the Eastern wild card race, and very impressive win Friday evening, a 3-0 shutout in Carolina with Linus Ullmark putting forth the whitewash. And I watched that game really carefully, particularly in the third period, because with the lead, I wanted to see how Ottawa was going to defend. And for a club that loves to throw pucks from anywhere in the Eastern Seaboard, like the Hurricanes do, the gaps were really tight. Their positioning was well. They always had a third man back. And I'm like, you know what? If this is the secret sauce for Carolina, there might be something here, because then they had a fly home, got to bed in the middle of the night, came again out against Pittsburgh on Saturday. And even though you could see a little bit of fatigue in the second half of the game, managed to win in overtime 3-2 on a Brady Tkachuk goal. And the big acid test is really coming up for them now, because they will embark starting on Tuesday evening a 9-game road trip. They're only 5-7-1 on the road, and their first 8 are against Western Conference teams. So if the Senators come through this stretch, you can bet they're going to be around at the end.
Yeah, and they're going to cause a lot of problems for the Islanders and for the Boston Bruins and for the other teams that are got their sights set on the 2 wild card spots. If they can keep playing like this, and you're absolutely right, 8 games against Western Conference teams, this is where the maturity will come out, either in a positive way or a negative way. You're on the road. You got to stay focused. You got to stay mature. And they're a young group. They're not an old group. So we'll see what happens. And Travis Green has done a real good job there so far this season. And, it makes it more exciting than to just say, well, that's just Detroit, Ottawa, Buffalo, that group that never make it. So let's see.
I want to touch on this Cam Fowler deal. So he has been acquired by the St. Louis Blues along with a 2027 4th-round pick for Jeremy Biakabatuka. I was going to have you say that name, but I wanted us to stay friends long term. He goes to the Ducks along with a 2027 2nd-round pick. And I'm wondering if this is the beginning of the cleaning of the house in Anaheim. The Ducks now have, with Fowler's departure, 9 defensemen on their roster are 23 years of age or younger. The Ducks do pick up 11 years on this trade also. I mean, they're getting younger. They're going to assume about 39% of Fowler's $6.5 million deal that has 1 more year on it. But another piece to this that I'd like you to speak to, Fowler played 991 games with the Ducks, every single one in Anaheim. And is this a situation that you think maybe Pat Verbeek could have waited another 9 games so Fowler could have reached 1,000 in Anaheim? Because I certainly have to believe this deal still would have been there in 3 weeks.
Yeah, the thing that makes me think that Fowler wanted to go now is the fact that Pat Verbeek said that there was several conversations between him and Cam in the recent past. And, you know, it sounds like Pat was very respectful of the 15-year career that Fowler had with the Ducks. By the way, I think it's the best name for a Duck is Fowler. So I do think that, yes, they could have waited. And I don't know this, but I'll bet you Pat Verbeek asked Fowler, do you want to wait until you played 1,000 games here? Or do you want to go now? And he probably said, I'll just go when you're ready to do it. I would think. I don't know that, but I would think that. But he's still going to hit 1,000 games now with the Blues in the near future.
Kind of brought to mind a couple of years ago what Philadelphia did with Claude Giroux, who was their longtime captain, and they actually waited for him to play his 1,000th game before dealing him to Florida.
Well, we had the infamous Kevin Lowe, who won 6 Stanley Cups in his career, and now scored the first goal ever for the Edmonton Oilers, and they traded Kevin to us in New York, and I think it was like within his first 10 games that he played his 1,000th game and had the ceremony at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Some league and player notes. Matt Zuccarello and Jonas Brodin returned Saturday for Minnesota in their win against Philadelphia. Conversely, they managed to lose against Vegas on Sunday evening. And on the injury list for the Wild, Jake Middleton, broken finger, out week to week, and he actually put his hand out. And that's probably an instinctive thing, but nonetheless, the author of the shot was Evan Bouchard on Edmonton. So you knew that was not going to end well. He's on LTIR. Jack Drury from Carolina, we had mentioned him last week, went down for injury, and he is now out week to week with a hand injury. On the waiver wire, Oliver Wahlstrom claimed off waivers from the New York Islanders. Pierre Engvall was also put on waivers to clear cap space for Matt Barzal, Anthony Duclair, and Adam Pelech. Barzal and Pelech both returned Sunday in Chicago, and Engvall was actually in the lineup as well. But let's move forward with the Islanders. They lose another one late. Connor Bedard scored with 54 seconds left in regulation, a goal that Ilya Sorokin actually knocked into his own net. The special team woes are just ridiculous. 0-for-4 in the power play. They're down to 12.2%, and they only killed 1 out of 2 shorthanded situations, and so they're below 65% penalty killing, last in the NHL in both. And this is something that, you just can't say that we're going through a bad stretch. I mean, the special teams stink.
Well, and this is the one part of hockey that is coaching. I mean, that is absolutely set plays. The power play is a set play, how you enter the zone, how you set up once you've got possession in the zone. Penalty killing is how you're going to play this. Is it going to be, how you're putting the box together and 5-on-4, blocking shots and so on. So I don't know. I'm not a coach. I'm not critical of anybody, but I do know that there's something wrong when you're 32nd in power play and 32nd in penalty kill.
And that penalty kill, they were supposed to be more aggressive this year, and it has only gotten worse than what it was from last year. So you want some more stink in New York? I'm going to give it to you. The Sabres are now 0-7-3 in their last 10 and blew a pair of leads of 2-0 and 3-1 in Toronto. But how about John Tavares? 14th career hat trick. It was a natural hat trick. And you have to think, with him being an unrestricted free agent, he has played incredibly well, as has Mitch Marner, who's also a UFA. These two players really making a case to stay in TO.
They are. It's a whole different case, of course, that Marner's making than Tavares is making. Marner will get somewhere in between the Matthews contract and the Nylander contract, somewhere in there. Tavares, in order for him to stay with his boyhood dream team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, because he is from Oakville, just outside Toronto, he'll have to take a significant pay cut because he'll never be able to put him into this lineup cap-wise if he stays where he is now. It's just not possible. So it'd be nice if Tavares stayed again, because you're right. He's when you think of him giving up the captaincy and the way he's played, and no bitterness, no nothing. I mean, we're seeing bitterness around the league in other places, as we know. You're sure not seeing it in Toronto.
But then again, for Brad Treliving, the proof is going to be in the playoffs because the postseason has been so checkered for this franchise.
Oh yeah, everything's about the playoffs. Everything in Toronto is going to be, do we get out of that first round? If they get out of the first round, which is always tough when these playoffs are tough. If you end in that 2 or 3 spot, you don't get a wild card team. You're getting a pretty good team that's going to get eliminated. So it's as in the past 3 or 4 years, everything will revolve around how do they do in the playoffs.
And just a quick final note on the Leafs. With Anthony Stolarz on IR, although the lower body injury does not appear to be as serious as possibly first thought, Dennis Hildeby, 24 saves against Buffalo on Sunday. This is the human side of the story. And in order to do that, we are going to take you back 107 years. This week will be the anniversary of the first NHL game, which was played on December 19th, 1917. And Neil, before we get into the story, can you guess how many goals have been scored in NHL history?
Well, I don't need to guess because I've been constantly adding them up.
You've been counting every step of the way.
Yes, because I knew once I started when I was born, then I started adding them up. And to my calculations, there's been 383,493 goals scored since the puck drop on December 19th, 1917.
All right. Well, there appears to be some debate, or there has been some debate on who actually scored the first goal. As recently as 2016, though, a 2002 book appears to have settled the issue, documenting some deep research and looking for newspaper accounts and advertisements showing the actual start time of 2 games. So we'll set the scenario for you. The Toronto Arenas played the Montreal Wanderers at 8:15 on December 19, 1917 at the Montreal Arena. It was also known as the Westmont Arena. And the Montreal Canadiens played against the Ottawa Senators in Ottawa at 8:30. Now, in addition to the game in Montreal scheduled to start 15 minutes earlier, the match in Ottawa was also delayed by 30 minutes due to a contract dispute with some of the Senators players. So, the official NHL score sheet lists Dave Ritchie having scored 1 minute into his game, while Joe Malone of the Canadiens tallied at the 6:30 mark in Ottawa. Thus, it is safe to say the first goal in NHL history was scored by Dave Ritchie, who will be part of NHL lore forever. So more to this story, the 10-9 win for Ritchie's Wanderers was their only win in the NHL. The arena, which they shared with the Canadiens, burned down 2 weeks later. The Canadiens moved to the Jubilee Arena while the Wanderers folded. And Ritchie himself played for every NHL team. Don't get too excited because it was only 5 between 1917 and 1920. And he was also the last active member of the Quebec Bulldogs. He briefly quit as a player to become a referee before returning to play briefly in the mid-1920s before retiring for good. He passed away in 1973 in Montreal at the age of 81. So, Neil, I know how much that we love our history. And just to be able to go back to the very beginning to that first goal, it's quite a story in NHL lore.
Well, the other thing I want to tell the listeners is that the whole league was playing that night, because the whole league was Toronto Arenas, Montreal Wanderers, Montreal Canadiens, and Ottawa Senators. It was the original 4.
Yeah, it's a full slate.
Yeah, and then as you said, the arena burned down. I guess they went the rest of the season with 3 teams, and so it's fun to look back and find all this stuff. And of course, back then, it was a job to these guys. It was just a job. They got to do this and got to have a job, and it wasn't a big deal like it is now. It was just a job. They happened to know how to play hockey, ended up getting paid for it. But it's really fun to go back, and I know you enjoy it. I enjoy hearing about it and talking about it.
Well, what do we say at the beginning of our show when the intro is running? Every episode of NHL Wraparound is aimed to leave our listeners and our viewers more informed.
And hopefully, not all of you knew about Dave Ritchie.
You do now. So with that, we're going to close our show. Thanks for Colorado Avalanche General Manager Chris MacFarland for joining us today. Thank you to our listeners. Send any comments, questions to NHLWraparound@gmail.com. And remember, all of our podcasts appear on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and our complete catalog can be found on our website, NHLWraparound.com. So subscribe, like us, and also check out some of our shorter clips on X at NHL Wraparound. And just a reminder that Neil and I will be back on Wednesday with our shortches with more immediate and in-depth coverage from around the NHL. So on behalf of Neil, I am Vic, and we will speak to you again on Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.